My name is Bill Pitt. I was born in Mobile, Alabama, September of 1930, and I was raised in Mobile. Before I went into the Army, I was in the Merchant Marines. I joined the Merchant Marines when I was 16 years old. Made my first trip to sea in December of 1946. And I had traveled all up and down the East Coast from Nova Scotia, Halifax, Canada, you name it, whatever. All the way down to all of the islands down on the East Coast, down past Cuba, all the Virgin Islands, including Fort La Cruz, Venezuela. Never heard the word Korea before. Went to sea for 4.5 years, seen quite a bit of the world. My last trip I got off of in New Orleans. I was on the Alco Ranger. And I went to the hall. When you're in the Merchant Marines, when you get off a ship, you have to go to the hall and you register and pick a number so that when another ship comes in going someplace else, you bid on it, and the lowest number gets the job. Well, lo and behold, we go to the hall, and what happens? They said, you can't register. And I said, what do you mean I can't register? And they said, well, there's a Korean War going on. I said, what the hell has that got to do with me? And they said, well, you got to wait till the Army drafts you. And I said, oh, no. So I left there, and I went outside, and I run into a buddy of mine, Herman D. Owens. He was having the same problems. And he told me, he said, Bill, he says, let's go to Mobile and see what they say. He said, and then we'll find out from there. So we did. We came to Mobile. They told us the same thing in Mobile. Well, I wasn't satisfied, and he wasn't satisfied, so we took another trip. We got back on the train, and we went to Houston, Galveston, you name it, and whatever. Well, maybe we should have stayed in Mobile, because on the way back, we stopped off in Louisiana over there again and went down to French quarters. And the last thing I remembered was we was sitting there drinking with a couple of Cajun queens. 2 days later, I woke up. We both woke up. And where was we at? We was in Montgomery. In a little room, and everything in there was olive draft, the bunks and everything. And there was a big old fella standing in the doorway with an Army uniform on, and he must have been born in the Army because he had hash marks from his shoulders all the way down to his wrist. He said, hey, wake your buddy up and come in here. And I asked him, I said, well, who in the hell are you? He said, never mind who the hell I am. He says, wake your buddy up and get in here. So I woke Pee Wee up. He said, what's going on? He said, where we at? I said, man, I don't know, but I don't like the looks of this place. He said, who wants us? I said, it's a man in there wants us. We're going to whip him? I said, no, he's too big to whip. He said, okay. So we got in there, and he says, fellas, I want you to listen to me. He said, you're in the Army now. I said, hold it right there. What do you mean I'm in the Army? And he said, well, you are. And I said, no. And he says, your name Herman D. Owens? And he slid a piece of paper out there to me. And I said, no. I said, that's him. He says, well, he slid another piece out there, and he said, well, you must be William Pitt. He said, ain't that your signature? And I said, yeah. I said, wait a minute. I said, you know, in Alabama, there is a law of Shanghaiing people like they do these old drunks on these snapper boats. He said, we didn't Shanghai you. He said, you signed, you in the Army. Now shut up and get in there and said, they'll send you some clothes. Well, the next thing I know, we was on a bus and we was headed to Fort Jackson, South Carolina. We got to Fort Jackson, South Carolina, and they processed us up there, and they busted us up. They sent us to Camp Atterbury, Indiana. I never will forget that. This was in September, and believe it or not, in September it was snowing up there in Indianapolis. Woke up the next morning, the ground was all white, and I said, what in the hell is all of this? And I won't never forget, my commanding officer was of Company M, 109th, and at the Bloody Bucket. That was the Pennsylvania National Guard. My first sergeant was Sergeant Carey. They had a Sergeant Baft and a Sergeant Pafone. They were all Second World War veterans. Never will forget them. But we stayed up there 6 weeks. I took my training on the M1917 A1 water-cooled belt-fed, water-fed Browning machine gun. Well, when I got through training on that, that was it. 6 weeks. Then they give us 10 days leave. The 10 days leave they give us, they took 5 of those for traveling time back to Mobile and back. And when I come back, I was told to go down to the first aid station. Well, I seen guys laying on both sides of the road down there, and I told Pee Wee, I said, man, something wrong. These fellas must have one hell of a party. And they said, no, I don't know. So we went into that dispensary, and there were 2 fellas there with basins out there filled full of methylate. And they had one of these old swabs that you clean toilets out with, and they'd dip it down there, and they'd hit you on the elbow, and the methylate would run off your arm. Bap, 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 bap. About 6 shots, and that last one was the bluebonnet plague. They had that and the Jap beetle. They said, when you leave here, said, go straight to your barracks and lay down, he said, because this stuff will get you. Now I know what them fellas doing laying down on the road. So when we got back to the barracks, Pee Wee Owens down there, he said, man, he said, I feel funny. And I knew then what was going to happen. So he laid down on the bunk and he passed out. Well, I beat him to it. I seen what happened to him, and he was supposed to be tougher than me, so I laid down. So when I woke up, there was a sergeant there standing there. Sergeant Bath was standing there and said, get your duffel bags, he said, and fall out. So we got them and fell out. They put us on a bus and took it over to the train station. And they loaded it on the train station, and we headed for Fort Lawton, Washington. And we looked on that train out there, and that thing was the longest train I ever seen. We'd gone around a mountain pass. One of them fellas said, hey, there's a train in back of us. And the other one said, no. Said, that's the tail end of this train. In the meantime, she had to eat them scrambled powdered eggs, you know, and the cinders flying out of the locomotive and everything like he was cracking ice while he was eating them. Anyway, we got to Fort Lawton, Washington. We was there one day, and they let us go to town that night, said, be back at 12 o'clock. Well, we came back at 12 o'clock. And next morning, they fed us, and they loaded us up on the General H.P. Freeman. Well, we left Fort Lawton, Washington up there. They had one of them real intelligent bands out there playing, so long it's been good to know you. And that kind of irritated me a little bit, you know. Anyway, we got on the ship and we started out. And during the night, these guys, they were singing and you name it and whatever, playing cards and gambling. That ship hit some rough water, and son, I'm gonna tell you, everybody on that thing, I think, was seasick. I couldn't stand it any longer, so I got my duffel bag and I went up topside up there by the smokestack. And one of the seamen come out there and told me, said, soldier, said, you can't stay out here. And I said, man, I can't sleep down there. He said, well, come on down here. He said, I got an extra bunk. He said, you bunk with me. He said, if we get there. So I did. Well, anyway, it took us 18 days to get to Yokohama, Japan. Well, when we got to Yokohama, Japan, we had another one of them smart aleck bands standing on the dock down there. If I knowed you was coming, I'd have baked a cake. Well, I said, man, it wasn't a bunch of morons, you know, to carry on something like that, but we didn't pay it no mind because I was one of the type of fellow that Korea didn't bother me. I didn't know what I was in for. Didn't know what I was facing or nothing else. I didn't even thought about it. So we stayed there one day, that night, and the next morning they put us on a Japanese freighter. Never will forget it. Number straw mats all over that thing. That was the filthiest thing I ever got on. And we went to Busan, South Korea. And as we got off of that ship, there was a big old sergeant out there, and he was getting groups of men and putting them in sections. And he pointed his finger at me and 5 other fellas. He said, all right, all you guys over here. Said, this is the mortar men. I told my buddy Charles Powell, I said, Powell, I said, where's a mortar man? He said, you know what a mortar is? I said, man, I don't know what no mortar is. He said, well, don't tell them that. He says, because if you do, he said, you're going to be in the rifle company. So I said, well, okay. So anyway, I lost my buddy back there in Fort Benning out there because a colonel come around there and he wanted airborne, you know, and he pointed his finger at me and said, soldier, you make a good airborne. I said, what do you mean airborne? He said, oh, yeah. I said, well, not me. He said, what's the matter? You scared? I said, man, I ain't scared of a damn thing. I said, when it comes to walking, I can walk a pretty good ways. When it comes to swimming, I can swim a pretty good ways. I said, but when it comes to flying, I said, I can't fly a damn inch. He said, son, you got good sense. And so I walked off. Well, anyway, getting back to Pee Wee, Pee Wee showed up a little later on in this story. We went ahead and like I said, we got on the 6x6 bus out, a truck, loaded down with 4.2 ammunition. Well, all 6 of us didn't get there, I don't mind telling you. Well, but 2 of us got there, me and Powell. I won't tell you about the rest of it, but anyway, we got up there and I had a sergeant, was a platoon sergeant. Anyway, like I said, I won't tell you about what happened to the other 4 guys, but when I got up there, you know, I had joined Sergeant Hope, and these fellows had just came back from the Yalu River. And he come running out there. He was wanting a replacement because he grabbed me and said, where are you from, soldier? I said, Alabama. He said, I am too. He said, I think he said he was from Anniston, Alabama. And I told him, I said, is that right? He said, yeah. He said, and I tell you what, I'm going to guard you like a baby because if you get hurt, he said, I can't go home. And I said, oh? And he said, you are a martyr man, ain't you? I said, a martyr? I said, man, what the hell is that? He said, oh, no. You don't know what a martyr is? I said, no. He said, you're not. I said, yeah, I'm serious. He said, you see that thing out there? And I looked out in front of where the bunker was and everything, and he said, that's a mortar. And I said, what, that 4-inch pipe sticking up out of the ground? Well, it wasn't about 2 foot sticking up out of the ground. The rest of it, they had fired it so much that it done dug into the ground, and all you could see was ammunition at the top of it up there, you know, and that 4-inch pipe sticking out of the ground. And he said, well, I'll tell you what. He said, you're going to know this thing backward and forward, he said, for tomorrow morning. And you know what? He wasn't kidding, because I did. I can tell you the nomenclature of that 4.2 mortar, the range of it, the weight of the rounds, the weight of the barrel, the base plate, and everything else. Anyway, we get back to that. I went on in to see P where he was. And the part that I like to forget is the day that I almost got killed. I never heard the expression incoming mail before, but we were sitting there eating, and believe it or not, they had sent some steak and French fried potatoes up there. Had some coffee, and he took me out there to gun emplacement and set me down and told Powell, he said, tell him what you know about the 4.2. And he left. Well, one of them rounds come in, it was whistling. And Powell had been told about this, and he said, that sounds like incoming mail. I said, hell, I ain't been here long enough to get no mail. And another round came in. It landed way the hell on the other side of that one. Well, Sergeant Hope was standing over there in the CP that was all sandbagged in, hollering and cussing and raising all kind of hell. And I thought he done gone crazy. Powell jumped up and started running. He says, come on. And I knew what he was running from. And man, Hope come out there and met me about halfway and grabbed me by the arm, and I lost half of my French fries, and I just grabbed my meat coming out of that bad mess gear before we got to the CP. And I said, man, what's wrong with you? You going crazy? I said, let me go get my coffee. Well, he grabbed me and jerked me back into that CP. And about that time, that other round came in. Bingo. It hit that 4.2 mortar. It blowed that mortar and all them rounds to hell and back. And we spent the rest of the day and half of the night covering up all those rounds around there. I won't never forget that as long as I live. And I reckon that was one of the warnings, and the second warning was they took me off of the gun from being a assistant gunner, because the gunner we had, the assistant gunner we had, he acted like he was an old man. He took real slow putting the rounds in the barrel, and I told him, I said, man, let me put them things in there, because they had an order of rapid fire, 10 rounds, rapid fire. And he done took one in there and started the other one in there. So I jumped in the hole and I started throwing them in there. In fact, I like to put 2 in there at one time. Well, long after that, there come a boss out there. Here come the second lieutenant out there. He says, Bill, you get out of that hole. He said, forward observer got hit. And he said, I'm going to send you on the hill. Said, get you a radio operator man. And I said, me? I don't know nothing about no 4.2 mortar. Well, come on down to CP, he said, and I'll familiarize with it. I went in there and he gave me a pair of binoculars, pointed out a little fellow we had out there, a little short guy, just got married. He told me, he said, he's your radio operator. He said, he knows how to operate the radio. And I said, what happened to the other one? He said, he's been wounded. He said, this is his third time. That fellow's name was Sergeant Hedges. And I took his place. And like I said, yeah, 3 times. Well, when the fatal accident happened to my radio operator, I called it quits. And me and my lieutenant had a few words, and I told him, no, I'm going home. You know, I'd been there long enough to go home, and I'm ready to go home. And I reckon that's about all I want to say about Corey, except I do want to say this. The fellas that served in Korea, I won't never forget you. And God bless the soldiers that are serving today. And may the God give them strength. It's kind of pitiful to know that the American people didn't know nothing about the Korean War. But since I've been home, I was field cadre at Fort Jackson, and I reckon one of the greatest compliments I ever had is after I got out of the Army in '53, my wife sent me to town to get some white paint to paint the ceiling in the bedroom. And I went to Sid and Roebuck, and I walked in the door, Sid and Roebuck, and there was a young fella in there, clean cut, nice looking fellow, black head, and he walked up to me. He said, Sergeant Pitt. And I said, oh God, who is this? He said, you don't remember me, do you? And I said, well, give me a minute. He said, well, anyway, he said, my name is Figario. He said, you know, I want to tell you something. He said, when you was in the Army, we was in the Army, he said, I hated your guts. I hated the ground you walked on. He said, but you know what? He said, if it hadn't been for you, he said, I wouldn't be back here today. He said, I want to thank you. He shook my hand about that time the intercom called him to go somewhere else in the store. And that was one of the greatest compliments that I ever got from anybody. Since then, I had done everything I could for the Korean veterans. I've been the president of the Gulf Coast chapter of Korean War vets for 2 years. I'm in my 3rd year. We got a color guard. We participate in schools, raising the flags, teaching the kids how to fold the flags, say the Pledge of Allegiance and all that. Not only that, we go to the churches, raise flags at church ceremonies and fire stations, town halls, you name it, whatever. And when one of our veterans die, we send a wreath of flowers to the mortuary. We stand a death watch for them, one at the head of the casket, one at the foot of the casket, and carry the casket to the grave for them. And when the storm wiped out our memorial there in Mobile, Katrina, myself and about 4 more fellows had put this memorial back together in this more beautiful land it was the day that it was dedicated in 91, or 2000, I mean. And other than that, that's about all I can want to talk about, you know, as far as Korea. But I'll say this. When you say the word Korea, you just say death, because you don't forget death and you don't forget Korea. Thank you.